God is dead, and we've killed him. This is the phrase Friedrich Nietzsche made famous in his Parable of the Madman over a century ago. Nietzsche foresaw the day where society wouldn't ground their ideas of morality and existence in the divine, but in themselves, and it seems today that time has come. But what are the ramifications of expelling our Christian foundation from broader culture? I mean, we're starting to see the cracks now, and it isn't pretty. Are we living in a Nietzschean world? Hi everyone, I'm Lenny Esposito, and today I bring you a fascinating discussion as my guest, Dr. Greg Ganssle, and I dissect Nietzsche's infamous madman parable and its eerie prediction of cultural collapse without God. Will Nietzsche's concept of will to power, where the strong overshadow the weak, replace love thy neighbor? How do Nietzsche's ideas influence modern anarchy, inequality, obsessions, and depression epidemics that we see running rampant today? And what does the Bible say about all this? Turns out Jesus had a better grasp on human nature and humanity's future than Nietzsche ever could. Finding real hope in a Nietzschean world, that's coming up on this. Come let us reason together. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome again to Come Let Us Reason Together. Glad to have you here, and we have an interesting talk today. I have with me my good friend, Dr. Greg Ganssle, and Dr. Ganssle has been thinking about the intersection of Christian faith and contemporary scholarship for over 30 years. He's a professor of philosophy at Biola University. He's previously taught at Yale and holds a PhD from Syracuse. And one of his more interesting deep dives, if you would be the subject of Friedrich Nietzsche. Now, Nietzsche is one of those characters that you kind of hear about from time to time. The name sounds familiar, but a lot of people, he's just an empty black box. They don't know anything about him except maybe stay away. That seems to be what a lot of Christians react. However, that's actually selling him a little bit short. And what I'd like to do is bring Dr. Ganssle on. We're going to talk about Nietzsche as well as how much of Nietzsche's thought from 100 years ago, 125 years ago, is actually influencing our culture today, or at least our culture is reflecting where he believed it was going to go. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. So first of all, Greg, welcome to the show. Glad to have you with me. Nice to see you. So
Thanks.
You've of
Glad
course,
to be here.
You of course, have been part of Come Reason before. You did one of our Dare to Defend conferences, which was great, and you talked on the subject of beauty and flourishing, and that kind of ties in to a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So why don't you tell us a little bit, first of all, about what got you interested in Nietzsche and who this character is? Because like I say, I think a lot of people just have this, maybe they have a Snidely Whiplash character kind of idea in their heads, but they don't have any idea who Nietzsche actually is. So,
Yeah, well, both Snidely Whiplash and Nietzsche had great mustaches.
yes,
So
right.
they do have that in common, right? I got interested in Nietzsche when I was working in Connecticut with the Rivendell Institute, which was the think tank at Yale. I was able to be an adjunct teacher, part-time adjunct at Yale for about 10 years. And the course I taught, which was a history of philosophy, we often finished with Nietzsche. And we would read his book on the genealogy of morality. And in the very beginning of this book, in the preface, he says, he starts asking questions not about the content of morality, but the very practice of making moral judgments. And then he asks the question, are these practices good for life? Do they contribute to flourishing or not? And throughout this work and other works I later found out, he takes this posture of saying yes to life. Now, the first time I read this work, I was also reading through the Gospel of John in my devotional life. And in the Gospel of John, the word life is used either by or about Jesus about 30 times. It's the most common image or metaphor that's employed about the mission of Jesus. And I thought, this is really interesting. Both of these guys are about life. I should put them in conversation with each other. At the time, I knew almost nothing about Nietzsche. I'm not a Nietzsche scholar. I don't read German. I just started reading stuff. And so one summer, I read through all of his published works and just started reading some secondary lit. When I moved out here to teach at Talbot, I started reading, I read through them all again and took notes, and I've taught a class. And so I'm slowly learning. And the culmination of this is hopefully I'm well into my draft of a book called Life, Death, and Freedom: Jesus Questions Nietzsche. And okay, so
Oh,
that's
excellent.
how I got interested. So who was this guy? Nietzsche is a 19th century thinker. He's born in 1844. Um, Very interesting life. He was extremely smart, a gifted student. He suffered from very bad health his whole life from the time he was young. He had horrible headaches. His vision was bad. He some people think maybe he had a brain tumor. Um, and as a result, he could only spend. There were periods where he could only spend a half an hour a day reading and writing, because the pain was so great. Um, he was raised in a Lutheran home. His father was a Lutheran minister. He had ministers all throughout the generations. But by the time he was about 16, he was losing. He lost his faith, and I think there are a few things that contributed to this. His father died when he was 5. His brother died, and he was at this prestigious boarding school and learning classical literature. And in his mind, the Bible, the New Testament, just didn't stand up to the beauty of classical literature and all of the scholarly work that he was doing. When he applied it to the Bible, it to him it seemed like it wasn't historical. So that's kind of like a little bit about who he was, and how he got to the point where he rejected Christianity.
Okay, so Nietzsche's coming up of age in Germany in the 19th century. And I think that's
Yes.
important because you have to remember at this time, he's born when Marx is at his peak. The German higher
Mm-hmm.
criticism of starting to doubt, well, how the Bible is constructed, right? The higher critics
Mm-hmm.
out of Germany start to think that rationalism, following Kant, is the ultimate goal of the day, and rationalism can solve
Mm-hmm.
every
Yep.
problem. And so when you put all of that together with someone who's led a tough life, as you said, who's
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of negative impact, who's heard the promises of God, but maybe as a young man felt, well, I'm sure not seeing those. And is
Mm-hmm.
very, very intelligent and assuming the Hegelian dialectic, right? The idea that man is always progressing, assuming the
Mm-hmm.
idea that we can reason our way into telling what's true and what's false, and you wrap all these things together, you could kind of see where the cracks start to show and why
Yeah.
he would turn from faith. I think that's a fair summation. What he lands on,
Yeah.
though, is something completely interesting, and the book that really kind of highlights this is "Thus Spoke Zarathustra." I think that's kind of his most
Mm-hmm.
popular work.
Yeah.
And so how does he then take all of this, if God isn't true, if there is this suffering in the world, but there's this idea of we should be able to live life in a way that's considered flourishing, and we'll have to unpack what flourishing meant for Nietzsche, because I
Yeah,
think
we
the
will.
Christian view of
Yeah,
flourishing is completely different. But so why don't you tell me
yeah.
how he then landed, taking all of that into account?
Yeah, it's interesting because he definitely comes out of the echoes of the kind of rationalism you're talking about it. You're talking about he was deeply influenced by romanticism, right? I mean,
Oh,
he was a musician, and he loved music. He was swept away by Wagner for a period of his life. His music and his philosophy. He followed Schopenhauer's philosophy for a while, but he always rejected Schopenhauer's pessimism. Schopenhauer argued that life is not worth living, and Nietzsche never went for that. And it was really his project to carve out how it could be worth living. And so even though he kind of comes out of the shadows of that kind of rationalism, he is in some ways anti-rationalistic. He's not optimistic about the human ability to figure everything out. He thinks human beings are biological animals. And nothing more. And so he doesn't have these heroic aspirations for human beings. And he thinks if we take seriously the facts about human beings, then that undermines a lot of what he calls metaphysical philosophy. And so metaphysical philosophy is trying to ground aspects of human life and experience in something higher. And of course, Christian philosophy is part of this, right? That moral reality comes from God, that we have purpose because it comes from God. And there are other ways to do philosophy metaphysically, Nietzsche thinks. Kant is a metaphysical philosopher. And of course, today there are a lot of people arguing that Kant is actually a deeply theistic thinker. But I mean, Nietzsche didn't think so. Um, Trying to ground human nature and human endeavors in something higher, and in his middle period he rejects this explicitly, and he says what we need is historical philosophy, and that's really how did these concepts come into being, and how did they take hold of us? Like the concept of traditional morality, like the concept of God, like the concept of even some of the things you said that come out of rationalism, human destiny, and he kind of critiques all of these things. Um, he thinks that human beings are very easily deceived by our own aspiration to be great, and we then think that our discoveries must really matter, that we're getting to the deepest foundation of things, and he points to Christianity, but he also points to the sciences, and not the hard sciences, because in German the term science is for any academic endeavor, right? It's a broader term.
yeah, it's
He's
much
not
more like the
distinguishing
Greeks used
between
it. Yeah.
physics and history. Yeah. And he says, look, all of these projects kind of think like there's a goal that's hidden that we have to commit ourselves to finding, whether it's heaven or the truth about the beginning of the universe. And he says this posture is counts against how we can live our lives.
And if he's dismissing God, which was what much of the higher criticism of the day was doing. Then what does he come up with? And his most famous work is Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I think this is kind of where most people's understanding of Nietzsche kind of falls, is within this framework. Although he moved, right? He changed his views a little bit throughout his life.
Mm-hmm.
So so why don't you tell me kind of like what is the full impact of this, and how did he start to see the world, and then where it led to?
Yeah, and probably a way to get a handle on Nietzsche is through three overlapping themes, and there are probably more, but we can start with the death of God, and then we can talk about the what he calls the transvaluation of values, and then his campaign against nihilism, right? And these are overlapping. So he's very famous for the death of God. There's a great passage in, two of them actually, in his work, The Gay Science, which was the one just preceding Thus Spoke Zarathustra, where he has this parable of a madman who stumbles into the marketplace, and he says he's looking for God, and everybody laughs at him because the marketplace was full of atheists, and the madman just drills these people with the impact of the death of God. And what's interesting about the death of God stuff in Nietzsche is his primary audience that he's criticizing are the atheists of his day, because the atheists thought we can remove God and everything remains the same.
Right.
We keep morality, we keep optimism, and he's saying things like, the madman is saying things like, who gave us the sponge to wipe away this horizon? There's no longer any up or down. Everything is silent. How can we are the ones who killed God. Now, he doesn't literally mean that God used to be alive and now he's dead. It's that belief in God itself has become unbelievable. So God is not even an option. And in the middle of this section, the madman says, must we not become gods to be worthy of this deed? And I actually think this is a turning point.
That's huge, yeah.
Yes, it takes a God to overthrow God. And so what does he mean by this? I think what he means is we have to become the creators. We have to create our own values and purpose and meaning, because there is no objective value, purpose, and meaning. And so that's kind of the first.
So I want to pause there, because what I want to do also is I don't want to get so much into the analytics of Nietzsche and not understand the practical applications. Part of my goal here is to reflect upon this, and the Nietzschean madman parable is really important for today's society, because those assumptions still hold true. However, we are starting to see cracks in our social fabric because we continue to assume that God is not the actual progenitor of moral values, right? We don't have to listen to those are old, those are ancient. We don't have to believe them anymore. Yeah. But we've not replaced them. And this is, and I like what some people say is like, Nietzsche was an atheist, but he was an honest atheist.
Yes.
He said, I realize if we follow this to its conclusion, you're going to have a society in chaos. It's going to end in anarchy. It's going to end in, people rioting for whatever they want, or shooting those you don't agree with. Gee, doesn't that sound kind of familiar in what I, so how do you see that playing out to today? And then we'll get into maybe the metamorphoses of the spirit and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So let's take each of these 3 points and let's talk about how they are being reflected back to us now
I
that we're a
think
century
I think
later.
you're making a good point here. There's a in his unpublished work, he makes in his notebooks, he makes a comment that he is sketching the the history of the next 200 years in terms of nihilism. And he thinks it's going to take 200 years. Well, it's been, as you said, 125 years since he died, and it's 135 or more years since he was writing. And we are seeing some of these things. So for most of the time since Nietzsche died, people have the secularized part of society, Western society, what we might call the atheist Western society. And not everybody's an atheist there, but um, is has gone on as if we can continue the values and the way of life, and we can just reject God. There was always kind of a deep respect for the content of Christian morality and the content of Christian behavior when it was at its best, and and Nietzsche would have none of that, right? He thinks it's um, once you get rid of God, all the foundation is gone,
Right.
and so what is going to be left now? Nietzsche is not actually a moral, well, he's not a nihilist. He's not a moral nihilist. He thinks that he's a kind of a relativist, but not the kind we think of today. So today, when you think of relativism, you think that the content of moral values or something like this is relative either person to person or culture to culture. And in contemporary relativism, there's a deep assumption of egalitarianism. Each person or culture has just as much authority as any other. And
The assumption of equal worth and all of that comes into
all of
play.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
He
Which
would
is a
have not,
Christian idea.
well, it is, right? And he is not an egalitarian. He's a relativist, not of various equal cultures, but he's a relativist of unequal worth. There are the strong and there are the weak. Now, traditional morality's fine for the weak. If they want to be humble, let them be humble. If they want to, you know, be sexually repressed, let them be sexually repressed. But the strong have nothing to do with that. And what really annoys him is that the weak have taken their moral framework, basically the Christian moral framework, and succeeded in imposing it on the strong. So the strong have been living with this huge sense of guilt that, oh, I can't exert my strength or my power or my independence. I have to, you know, love my neighbor as myself, or be an egalitarian and be concerned with the least of these. He has this great passage in genealogy where he says, "You cannot ask the birds of prey to stop snatching the little lambs." What are they going to say? They're going to say, "What are you talking about? We love little lambs. There's nothing tastier than a little lamb." and so he has a strongly hierarchical thing. Now, this gets into the will to power, right? His thing on power is, it's not that he says you should exert your power over other people and oppress them. He thinks strong people should just not pay attention to the weak. The power is exercised only in kind of a contest of equal people.
Okay.
You love a strong opponent, and this is where there's a very famous quip that most people who use it don't even know it's Nietzsche. Is whatever does not kill me makes me stronger, and it's kind of in praise of a worthy adversary.
Yeah.
The weak are
So
not worthy
yeah,
adversaries.
because if you're say a professional ball player or something like that,
Yeah.
you tend to, I mean, you can go outside throw the ball with your kids, right?
Hmm.
But you don't play in Saturday afternoon leagues because the challenge is just not there, right? I ride bicycles, and if you're riding, you know, I'll ride with the family and we'll have a little bit of fun. But if I want to ride,
Hmm.
I want to ride with someone who's a little bit better, just a little bit better than me, because it forces me to be better. And
Yes.
you find you operate at your peak when you're reaching up as opposed to when you're
Yeah.
reaching down. Now,
And
Hitler,
that's a great illustration for what he has going on when it comes to even things like morality, even things like what kind of life I should live. Yeah.
okay, yeah. Now Hitler read Nietzsche, and
Yeah.
I think he misunderstood him
Yeah.
to some degree. But a lot of these ideas did get circulated through, and the
Yeah.
idea that of unequal worth, for
Yeah.
example, obviously that's the Aryan race and the
Yeah. Nietzsche would have
Übermensch.
hated Hitler.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Nietzsche's sister loved Hitler. She was a Nazi
Oh,
and
okay.
actually met Hitler and married a man, and they were trying to start a colony in Paraguay based on the supremacy of the Aryan race and all of this. Um, but Nietzsche is actually a fierce critic of establishing any kind of anti-Semitic policies in government. And they were, I mean, anti-Semitism has been around a long time. Hitler didn't invent it.
Yeah, I know,
and
absolutely.
and there were policies coming up that would prohibit Jews from um, certain kinds of businesses and all of this. And Nietzsche was opposed to these things, and so
Well,
I
he
mean,
kind of thought, didn't he kind of think that it would almost an evolutionary approach, right? That the poor and the weak will they'll just die out. You don't have to be cruel. The overman, the Übermensch will eventually rule.
yeah,
That's
yeah, he thought not only will they die out, but we and he's not talking about the Jews here. He's just talking about the weak.
right.
We it'll be good when they die out, and there's no regret there.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like putting down a sick puppy.
yes,
That's the
yeah,
concept.
yeah. Although he wasn't in favor of actually contributing to that process.
Yeah, just
Um,
let them go.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like it's
and
like when you get your kid the kid wins the goldfish at the county fair.
yep,
First of all, my kids did that one, and it's oh look, I got a free fish, and I look at that fish is not free because now I got to buy a tank, a
yes,
filter,
yes,
food, rocks, and you're gonna want right, and inevitably the wife says, well, what are we gonna do with these? He said, wait 6 weeks, that fish will
yes,
be upside down
yeah, yeah.
because
We
that's
had
what.
one that lived 11 years.
Wow, you got lucky. You got lucky.
Well, maybe not, but anyway, go on.
But that's kind of the idea. Just
Yeah,
if you're weaker, nature will take its course. That's the
yeah,
idea. Now, your second point, I'm thinking you're talking about this idea of the evolution of the human soul, maybe that man, with the camel, right,
yes.
lying
Okay.
under the burden of the
Yes.
past versus a
Yeah.
lion that will rebel against the
Yeah.
oppression that stifles what the lion's true purpose is.
Yeah.
I'm
That is
terribly butchering
no.
that. So
You got it right. It's this parable in Zarathustra near the beginning of the book called the Three Metamorphoses, and he says the spirit, and he's talking about the kind of like the human condition. The spirit first becomes a camel, and what does a camel do? It carries burdens, other people's burdens, can't say anything about it, and goes where it doesn't want to. Then the spirit becomes a lion, and the lion is able to throw off the burden, but the lion can't choose a new life. It can say no, but it can't say yes. Then the spirit becomes a child, and the child is able to kind of pick its own values and able to say yes. This saying no, saying yes.
It's the idea that humans can create. So, for example,
Yes.
a dog can never say what's it like to be a cat, right? So
Right.
lion can say, you can't saddle a lion. Lion will say no. But a lion would never be able to say, if I wanted to eat herbs and not meat, or if I chose to build and not hunt.
Yeah.
The animals simply don't have that framework. They're limited. But humans, because we're rational animals, have choices of pretending to be
Yeah.
a lion or acting in ways that the lion would use, right? And even I think certain martial arts use different poses and strikes that they've seen from the animal kingdom to emulate that kind of thing.
And I think, Nietzsche thinks that most people are camels, right? And they just accept these burdens of traditional morality and of Christianity, and they're oppressive. They tell you to push away your desires because something else is more important, and the something else is like not real. It's ethereal, and yet we spend our whole lives avoiding our desires because we have this sense of guilt and obligation, and so the child is the strong one, the one who, I mean, and I think there are many places where Nietzsche does this, where he takes a phrase from the Bible and he appropriates the picture for himself, and this one has become like little children,
Yeah.
not in your
A little
humility.
child shall lead them, right?
Yes, but in your ability to say yes and create your own value scheme.
So Nietzsche just completely disavows any idea of a sin nature. All nature is kind of there, and it's just how you appropriate it. Because what
Yes.
Christianity would argue, the reason why you say no to those things is because our nature is to do something that ultimately will lead to tragic ends or catastrophic ends. And society
right.
doesn't hold together like that.
Yeah. So what he says is suffering is a real part of human life, and the natural response is to ask why and to find someone to blame. And the leaders of traditional morality, including Christianity, convince people that we ourselves are to blame for our suffering. And that's the origin of sin. That's the origin of guilt. And it's a deception that, no, you yourself are to blame. And it's a very powerful, I mean, Nietzsche's psychological observations are spot on. In fact, Freud read the works of Nietzsche and was afraid that all of Freud's work had been published already in Nietzsche.
Wow.
And because of, he didn't use the same terminology, of course, but the subconscious, the deeper drives, how our motivations are not what we think they are. And this is where a lot of thoughtful Christians looked at people like Nietzsche and saying, he really captures the phenomenology of original sin and the experience of deflecting and hiding and all of these things that come out of our fallen nature. Yeah, so that's a good observation you make.
Okay, so you were going through these 3 points, and we talked about the death of God.
Yeah.
Right. And your second point was then
is we have to create new values.
We have to create new values. The little child. We have to somehow form, because again, if you borrow a Christian foundation, eventually you're going to be stuck in a Christian burden. And he doesn't want that. He doesn't want that. I've always struggled though to see he kind of talks about this amazing society that will flourish once the overman, once the new birth happens. But I just can't picture it in reality.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds very abstract. It's like Marx. Marx talks about these things as well, but they're always very abstract, because when you get down to the brass tacks of, well, wait a minute, if he doesn't have to work and he gets to read or write poetry all day, then why should I have to work? And pretty soon nobody's working. So with Nietzsche, how does he see this actually? How does a society cohere in a Nietzschean point of view? And it may not, he may not have answered this. I don't know, but I've not found anything. So
Yeah, I think he reflects very little on the kind of society that ought to be. And of course the ought can't be a moral ought for him. I think he has just this loose sense that the strong will ignore the weak, and the strong will be who they are, and have their little clubs. He was a critic of socialism and nationalism, and
very much an individualistic
ideology.
It
is very, very individualistic. And
so you look at today, you look at the Antifa movement and some of these anarchist pushes that are trying to, number one, they believe via force that they should knock down these restrictive parameters, these burdens upon which people carry, thinking that if we knock them all down, we have to build them up from scratch, then a newer, more utopian ideal would come forth. But it is very loose. It's very much, whatever happens, or whoever's holding the club at the moment seems to be the one that's running the show.
And knocking down is a lot easier than building up.
Knocking down is a whole lot easier than building up. Right. It's easier to be the food critic than to bake the cake. Yeah. Yep. So that's true. Now, this is kind of his last man idea, right? Last man in the herd.
Yeah. So the last man, that comes out in Zarathustra in that book. It's kind of like, well, I'm not confident I have a good grasp on it, but I think it's like the last gasp of the weak trying to manage their lives before the emergence of the Übermensch, or the Superman or Overman, who is really just the strong person as the strong person ought to be. And again, it's not a moral ought,
So Nietzsche holds a telos for humanity.
Yeah, and he thinks not for all of humanity. He says there is this picture out here, and if you're strong enough, you might embrace it. But he's not trying to get everybody to embrace it.
So it's kind of I don't know, Navy SEAL training. Not look to your right, look to your left. Those guys won't be here. Only 1 out of 10 of you will survive. But those are the guys we want.
Yeah, pretty much. I think he tries to be very consistent. He can't make a moral appeal, and so it's more like he points and says, and invites you to recognize for yourself, yes, that's the life I want. And
again, this is why I think there's a little, I don't think Nietzsche could have come about any earlier than he did, in any other place than he did. So there's obviously post-evolutionary ideology. Yeah. That Darwin lays a groundwork for him to think that we are coming from beasts and physically evolving. The Hegelian dialectic again is like, well, we're always getting better. We're always being more enlightened, and because we are being more enlightened, we're getting smarter. We're starting to discard
Yeah,
God.
yeah. He was no fan of that stuff, the progress stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
on the biological level, he embraced the broader Darwinian picture. Although a lot of people comment that his knowledge of Darwin, he didn't really get him right.
oh,
But
really? Okay,
um,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
So, but ultimately, where then does this leave him? What happens in his later years? Because that's what's fascinating to me.
yeah,
When he starts to try to live with his own philosophical understanding.
yeah. I mean, I get the impression that Nietzsche was. I mean, Nietzsche thought his work was very important, and he became a little frantic trying to write it out, to finish. And is there a premonition here that he was going to collapse? He collapsed in January of 1889, and the story is that he witnessed a cabbie beating a horse, and he tried to get between the cabbie and the horse, and he just collapsed, and had very few lucid moments until 11 years later when he died. He lived for 11 years in a state of more or less, not comatose, but I mean, he collapsed into insanity. And some people think, did he have a brain tumor? I mean, his father died of what they called softening of the brain, right? So there could have been this genetic kind of thing happening. Some people think, was he bipolar? Some people think it could have been syphilis, although he had very few sexual encounters. He's very bothered by that, and but at the same time, in his last year, you get this flavor in his writing where his megalomania just keeps increasing. And one of his later books, he has a section, "Why I Write Such Good Books, Why I Am So Clever." These are sections, and then the scholars fight about, okay, so was he beginning to lose his sanity at these points? And some of them say, well, you gotta, maybe not, because some of the stuff he wrote then was very good. And so there's a lot of mystery with how this unfolds towards the end of his life. But some
interesting. You immediately Wittgenstein comes to mind, right? Okay, I've completed philosophy. There, done. 26. Put a cork in it. It's all done.
Yeah,
and then he changes his mind in the second half of his life.
Then he goes to be a gardener at a monastery, and and among other things. But then he comes back, and
that's right.
And it's probably a good thing he did.
So, what do we see then today? How is all of these ideas? First of all, how is Nietzsche viewed today by the average atheist, maybe the average intellectual? The idea of once you throw off God, it seems inevitable that there's some kind of megalomania that will creep in. What's fascinating is every one of the cults, any cult of Christianity that you look to, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Jim Jones, David Koresh, any of these guys, they actually don't start off all that far afield. They get a little off, but as they start to kind of believe their press, it naturally grows into this thing. And it's my personal opinion is because it's the pride of Satan, right? This is what Satan does. And if you let it have its head, pride will just overtake you. It'll subsume you. And the more proud you get, the more crazy the stuff you say, and the more controlling you become. And that's one of the problems within the cults. But I see the kind of some of these patterns starting to show up again in Nietzsche as well, is where he just starts to believe his own press, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he certainly thought what he was doing was unprecedented. He was like opening doors that had never been opened before, and um, and so uh, I'm not sure people think that the megalomania comes out kind of is a result of the content of his thought. Um, but there are some things that are not far, because if you're going to create a value system for the strong, then this living independently and being strong and being immune from the opinions of others can set you up.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
for this kind of thing. And I think today Nietzsche is very popular. Most people don't go very deep with it, and there are a lot of misunderstandings. Um, I think it's an open question whether. I mean, so C.S. Lewis has this comment in The Abolition of Man where he says it's actually impossible to create a new value system, a completely different one. And everyone who tries um, basically takes one aspect of traditional morality and makes that one aspect the most important thing.
Yeah, whatever they like the best.
Yeah, whatever they like the best. And I'm still thinking about that. And it seems to me that strength and the ability to, execute what you set out to execute, um, these are the things that Nietzsche latched onto. And so there really isn't going to be a new value system. Um, now he's very strong on and you alluded to this earlier, uh, proper a healthy morality. That's a phrase he uses occasionally. A naturalistic morality is going to be about what is best for life. And for him, life is will to power. It's the expression of power. So you use the illustration of the ball player, or you as a cyclist, that there's an exhilaration that comes when you are pitted against a worthy opponent, whether it's another person or a hill you're trying to climb on the bike, and you express your strength and you conquer it. And that's the picture of the will to power. It's not like seizing political power or anything like that. Um, Although I suppose a person could choose that arena. Um, and that's what life is for him. It's like this constant um, um, pushing against whatever obstacles there are. And to me, it's an open question how much of his own life he experienced this kind of thing, because he just wrote his books.
Well,
And
yeah, but as you said, in his formative years, he was the direct opposite of that, right? Siegel and Schuster, the two Jewish boys who created Superman,
yeah,
have said that when they did this because they could never get the girl.
right,
And what they did was they created this character, this Übermensch, right, this Superman, in order
right,
to be the one who would never be pushed around by bullies,
yep,
never have to worry about, being attacked or anything like that. And the big joke was the geeky reporter Clark Kent was the guy that Lois Lane was in love with,
right.
and so they saw themselves in that.
Yeah,
in that
that's
role.
interesting. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, so that's kind of how they went, because they were 17, 18, 19, something like that when they wrote this. So that's kind of how the Superman character came to be.
Yeah.
And they put it in the popular comic book parlance. So I mean, I can see how Nietzsche would, throughout his life, have this kind of struggle because it's something that he never felt as a child, right? He wanted to it's I tell people I always want to go to Japan sometime because I want to be the tallest guy in the room at some point in my life. Have you ever noticed that all the Japanese monster movies, the monsters are always huge?
Yes, yeah.
They're always, Godzilla is like jumping and even the Power Rangers, they grow. And you got to say, why? There seems to be, maybe you should have a little bit of therapy. I mean, maybe your stature is a little bothered.
Yeah.
You're revealing this, and I'm wondering if Nietzsche is revealing a little bit of his insecurities. In that's idea.
Interesting. So you think about that little section where he says, "Why do I write such great books?" Well, you know what? His books never sold. I mean, literally, some of them would sell 180 copies.
Yeah, who buys philosophy books? I mean,
right. Well, even my books sell more than that, right? And not much more, but and so his books never sold, right? Towards the end of his life, he was really gratified to hear that there was a Danish philosopher who lectured on his work. But he got almost no recognition, so much so that he had to pay to have Beyond Good and Evil published. Because, part of that was the publisher was going bankrupt. So he had to just pay. It was like self-publishing. And so there might have been, so you can see, some of his trumpeting how great his ideas are could very well have been a compensation kind of thing. And so, it's a tricky thing to psychoanalyze people, especially, especially when they're dead.
I do it a little bit tongue in cheek.
C.S. Lewis is very strong on this. When he reads reviews of his own work and people talk about, well, he wrote this because of this and this and this, and he's like, they're always wrong. And so I do want to be careful enough. But I think for Nietzsche, he's trying to establish that life is worth living, and he never gave inches to pessimism about life, and this is part of Schopenhauer's as a background for him, and he just thought he was wrong, and that it's up to us to make our lives worth living. In some of his early works, he talked about this very aesthetically, right? Make your life a work of art.
So this actually is a great place for us to kind of come down upon, because what I've seen in our popular culture today is very much this idea.
Yes,
that life is worth living, but you have to define life for yourself as you understand it. You have to create the meaning for yourself. And of course you ask, again, if you engage with atheists, they'll say this, but we say it more subtly in things like the Disneyfication of morality. Follow your heart.
Yes.
Know what's inside of you. Well, what if your heart's deceptively wicked?
Yeah.
What if
we're pretty sure it is?
And from a Christian point of view, we're pretty sure it is. What we've seen, and this is why I bring it up, is we are in a culture where depression rates are skyrocketing, where the idea of meaning in life is becoming more and more fleeting. People don't understand it. People don't accept it. We have this whole boon of antinatalism where people aren't having babies anymore because who wants to subject the next generation to this torture? Even though we're living in the best time humanity has ever lived, who wants to subject the next generation? I have many discussions with late 20-somethings and 30-somethings along this lines, and it's amazing how pessimistic they actually have become. Because they can't actually find meaning. And what you find is the problem is that they're looking inside when they need to be turning that around. If you look elsewhere, if you look to serve rather than be served, the meaning actually comes. And Jesus, of course, taught this. Now, there was a writer from the New York Times, David L. Brooks, I believe, who wrote a book called The Second Mountain. And what he did was he looked at several different entertainment figures, actors, rock stars, CEOs, people of all walks of life who would be considered successful. And he found the pattern is similar. As those people were striving for their success, they were driven. And usually successful people are driven, right? There's a reason why Elon Musk works 7 days a week, or Jeff Bezos, or things like that. They're driven not because they want one more dollar. That it's not the idea that I need that money. It's that the idea that I need to win. That's the goal. I need to. If I'm on top, then I'm winning. Then I've achieved. There's these problems we want. So they are actually making their own meaning. But when they've done that, when they've reached that pinnacle, now I hold the world record in the 100-meter sprint, or now I've sold out every concert venue that I can sell. What now? Yeah. What do I do? What do I do next? And what he said was, those individuals who reinvented their goals, not for themselves, but they said, if I start working for this charity, if I pour my attention, and if I don't show up, then who's going to feed those people? See, the concern is shifting from, do I win, or who's going to take care of them? I need to be there to open the doors to take care of them, which, of course, Christian missionaries have known for centuries.
Yes.
But it's when you change the focus away from yourself to others, that all of a sudden they have real meaning, they have real contentment, they understand that there's value to life, because who else is going to do it, right? Yeah. So, and that's a Christian message. But it's completely contrary to not merely what Nietzsche may have believed, but to what our modern society actually is thinking. And is it any surprise that we're seeing these kinds of mental crises, especially in our youth, who are the first generation to be raised in this post-Christian secular world? So
I mean, there's so many things there to comment on. Sartre picked up some of these things, and he said there is no human nature. We have to create our nature. And that's a terrible burden to put on a finite person.
Yeah.
And to create our meaning.
Because you got to know where you're going, right?
Wait a minute.
In order to create a telos, you got to know what the end result's going to be. And how in the world would we know that?
And what if I choose wrongly? And I don't want to be so overly simplified to say this is why there's these crises of hopelessness and depression, but it's certainly a contributing factor, is this sense that, no, I have to make my life a work of art. And how do I know if I succeed now it's all a matter of competing with everyone else on social media. And so these things do have their roots through the existentialists back to people like Nietzsche. Marx doesn't have this problem because he's deified this revolution, which gives order and meaning to things, despite the fact that it won't. But coming out of Nietzsche, this stuff. Someone has to start asking the question: Is this beyond what a human being can do? And we can't choose. We can't invent meaning from that will sustain our whole life. We can invent meaning for an hour or two. And so I think you have a great observation there.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Well, so any last thoughts? Any areas we didn't uncover, or anything that we should talk about as we close?
I mean, this whole thing on meaning. So you think in the Christian picture, how almost everything that matters is a gift, and we receive the gift with gratitude and joy. Well, there's no pressure,
Yeah,
right?
good point.
And I think the posture of gratitude. I mean, this is for those of your listeners who are Christians and think, well, how do I navigate these complex hopelessness? I think gratitude is one of them. We take the time to thank God for things and recognize, oh my gosh, this is a gift, and I don't deserve it. I don't earn it. I don't have to fight for it in the sense to cling to it. So no, I can hold my life with an open hand because these things are gifts. Um, and I think that's a good place to land.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Greg. This has been a lot of
Sure.
fun.
Yeah.
We'll maybe it's a little geeky, maybe it's a little philosophically geeky.
Well,
That's what
some
we
of
do.
us are geeks. What
Yeah,
can we do?
yeah. Next time, maybe we'll get together. We'll talk about time and God.
Oh,
and how
yeah.
God and time come together. Because
Well, that's even more geeky.
yeah. It gets. But interestingly, the pot's starting to stir on that again.
Yeah.
As I'm understanding it. So anyway, it does open up a lot of questions. But hope you guys have a good time over at Biola, and I know you're doing great work there, and really
Thanks.
appreciate it. Thank you for watching this Come Reason video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like these, consider subscribing to our Come Reason YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button. And you can follow us on social media. Lastly, if you'd like to help keep these kinds of videos free, consider providing a donation by clicking on the donation button beside me. Thank you.